Freedom of speech is one of the fundamental values of our country and has been since the very beginning. However, as we approach the 250th anniversary of our country's independence, we need to take a look back at the original founders' intentions and how things have changed in 2.5 centuries. Irresponsible usage of social media in the case of People v. Marcan has called into question the limits of First Amendment rights to free speech and press, creating crucial new legal understandings of free speech in the digital age. Congress initially passed the First Amendment on September 25, 1789. It was then ratified by the states on December 15, 1791. The First Amendment reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. For more than 100 years, it was only applied to federal laws. In 1925, however, the Supreme Court began applying it to state laws as well, through a process called incorporation. As important as the First Amendment is to America, it is still rather vague. How the First Amendment is incorporated and how it is applied in different situations is ultimately left up to the judgment of the Supreme Court. Laws that the country follows typically have guidelines that are set in stone and do not leave questions. Even though it is a huge piece in the foundation of our country, the First Amendment can only be so specific. Due to this, many instances have occurred as a result of a misinterpretation of the First Amendment. In 1864, two anti-Lincoln newspaper editors forged articles during the Civil War, causing unrest. This forged presidential proclamation called for close to 500,000 people to join the Union Army, whether voluntary or by draft. The two newspaper companies had not been pro-Lincoln previous to this publication. Even though these newspapers did not agree with certain actions President Lincoln took, forging a presidential proclamation was not legal. Awareness of how far the First Amendment can be taken was made after Abraham Lincoln signed off on the action to shut down the newspapers and arrest the editors. This was later withdrawn, however, the situation shows how even though the First Amendment allows for freedom of speech and press, it is not without consequences. This shows how much newspapers and other public media can influence the public. Even though freedom of press is part of the First Amendment, there is a limit to the lengths you can go when publishing an article. In the 1970s, the study of bullying began to emerge in the field of psychology. Studies over the past 40 years have been done to distinguish the difference between bullies and their victims. The bullies have shown high social intelligence and are typically popular among their peers. On the other hand, bully victims are seen as hyperactive and impulsive. They also tend to struggle more academically and socially. Many different definitions of the term bullying have been created, such as a person is being bullied when he or she is exposed repeatedly over time to negative actions of the part of one or more other students, or bullying is repeated oppression of a less powerful person, physical or psychological, by a more powerful person. While not all the definitions agree on all points, they do agree that the act of bullying is a form of repeated aggression and an imbalance of power. The question of what a student is allowed to say, gesture, or suggest during a speech was brought to the Supreme Court on March 3, 1986. While intending to nominate an acquaintance for a position for elective office, Matthew Frazier made a speech to 600 of his classmates that was taken offensively to listeners. In his speech, he made references to another student that the school deemed inappropriate and caused the student to be suspended and banned from speaking at graduation. Matthew Frazier thought that this violated his First Amendment and sued the school. However, the court stated that this did not violate his rights because the First Amendment does not prevent schools from punishing their students for rude behavior. Making rude remarks and gestures in front of a large crowd has no beneficial outcome and will force the school to take action. If the school allowed this kind of behavior without punishing the student, then the school would not serve a purpose and would not be doing its job of educating its students on how to be kind citizens. This case shows that while you have the freedom to say what you want in this country, it will not always go without consequences. In an interview with an anonymous individual, we found that they experienced the negative effects of social media through cyberbullying. Tell us what happened.
It was on Facebook and it was terrible. Things like memes and comments, DMs, makes me feel crummy to even think about it.
In your case, do you believe that this was taken too far in relation to freedom of speech?
This person was pretty careful not to break any laws, and there were no direct threats. He was saying things like, I wish I could do something instead of I am going to do something. This means that there was no action that could be taken from a legal point to stop the harassment.
Did you report the incident?
I shared it with a buddy of mine who is a police officer, and he explained how the person was very careful not to make any direct threats. Not that I was looking for him to be arrested, I just wanted the harassment to stop harassing me. So it was very informal.
Do you believe there should be restrictions on what is being posted, or should it be filtered through?
That stuff is so hard to legislate because where do you draw the line? Everyone will still have their own opinion on where the line should be drawn. It would be wonderful if we lived in a society where people treated us the way we wanted to be treated.
How do you use social media today, and do you have any regulations?
This was on Facebook, and I have essentially locked down my Facebook account so nobody can post on it. So when it's my birthday, nobody has access to post on it and say happy birthday. I'm not as active on social media. I do have a couple of accounts, but still rarely use them for anything that's not work related. I realize I sound like a grumpy old person when I say this, but the whole social media world makes me feel kind of yucky. Because for every positive thing, I feel I see so much more that is negative and damaging and anonymous. I have little respect for those who go out after others, whether it's the celebrities or private people. Just the way they go out against others is so gutless and weak, and my overall experience has impacted the way I feel about that.
Overall, from this experience, what is the takeaway that you have?
In the best scenario, people are treating others the way they want to be treated, and parents are aware of what's going on in their child's life. But this is still a very complicated thing.
After asking for more information into a case on cyberbullying, we found the lasting impact it can have on a person of any age. Seeing how this affects someone's personal life on and off social media should be telling of how the impact of social media and the First Amendment doesn't go hand in hand. In the case of People v. Marquand, the defendant, a high school student, anonymously posted sexual information and photographs of classmates and other adolescents on Facebook, a social networking website. The defendant was charged with and pleaded guilty to cyberbullying under a local law enacted by the Albany County Legislature. The defendant appealed, arguing that the cyberbullying law violated the First Amendment. The Court of Appeals reversed the original decision, holding that Albany County's cyberbullying law was overbroad and facially invalid under the Free Speech Clause because the text of the law criminalized a variety of constitutionally protected modes of expression, a great deal more than acts of cyberbullying. This cyberbullying law and the subsequent appellate ruling demonstrate that it is not easy to give a modern interpretation of a century-old amendment. Albany County attempted to address a problem that the Founding Fathers could never have envisioned. However, the broad scope and language of the First Amendment makes it difficult to define some speech-related behavior as illegal, while other speech is protected. Given that the First Amendment was written 100 years before the invention of the car, and 200 years before the creation of Facebook, it's time to reevaluate this fundamental American right to ensure that it protects the right behavior while responsibly protecting potential victims from misuse of current technology.